Hey guys, what is up? AwesomeTheSauce here. Hope you guys are having a great day and welcome to another test run video. I'm gonna be covering the update that happened today. By the time you guys see this, it actually might be tomorrow, but I wanted to go over some of the new spell adjustments that happened during this test run update. So this update basically involved making sure that some of the Spellements pets actually upgraded the spells because before that they weren't. So that's been a very slight change, but the really big change is a complete buff to the Sprite Swarm spell that was initially in test realm. So I'm gonna go over all those changes, but before we even start on all of the Spellment stuff, I want to go to the Life School, train the new Sprite Swarm spell, and look at what it does, because this is actually kind of nutty. So if you go to Melinda Wu and train Sprite Swarm, the new Sprite Swarm is actually insane. So basically what it does, it gives you a 55 heal, a 525 heal overtime, it does it on all allies, and it also summons a life minion if you happen to have an overtime on you. So I tested this minion out, and basically you need to have an overtime on you, meaning you have to do it on the first or the second turn after the overtime's there. And once you've met that condition, you basically get an extra minion. And it can do all kinds of things. It can, like, you know, Brilliant Light. It can go for a triage. It can imp. The key is to meet the condition. I find this really interesting because that basically what this type of spell is, it's a conditional spell. And what a conditional spell basically does is if you happen to have something happen to you, if there's a certain condition that's met, the spell will do something that's much more than its pip value. There are many, you know, examples of this. Scion, I think, is the one that I feel like we've had in the game for the longest time. So basically the way Scion works, if you're a Storm, for example, if your opponent doesn't have any blades, it does literally double the damage, right? So we know that conditional spells can give literally 11 pips of damage, and that's what it does in the case of Scion. It literally doubles the damage. So these kind of spells can be absolutely incredible when used the right way. What we've also seen from a spell like Monster Mash is that you can actually get, when a condition is met, like your opponent having a weakness, you could actually get up to 2 pips of value. That's what they happen to do on this, right? So you normally have the 520 damage, but you get about 2 extra pips of value if your opponent has a weakness on you. What I find absolutely crazy about this is that this spell is basically giving you 4 pips of value if your opponent overtimes you. Let's say someone were to frostbite me. This heal is most probably gonna out-heal that frostbite, and then by summoning a minion, a follow-up spell like in a bomb actually becomes a much worse move. What does that mean? That means that this spell is going to be very good against schools that don't have powerful AoEs to punish the summoning of a minion. So I don't really see the spell being that good against fire, for example. Like if someone happens to elf you, yes, you heal them back and then you also summon a minion, but then they can dragon you. I'm not really sure how good that is in that case, but it's much more clear cut. When someone is gonna frostbite you, if someone honestly tries to like do something like King Art you even, there's a very real chance that by Sprite Swarming, you can actually take back some of the damage and summon a minion to recover even more. I really like this spell. So compared to the previous Sprite Swarm, which was just a random group heal that added very little to life in general, right? It was basically like a unicorn, but slightly better. It was nothing really it was nothing to write home about. This is on another level. This is actually a really good change. While most schools just overtime into a hit, this is actually I could see this spell after an overtime into a weakness, or a brace into this spell into a weakness being very solid moves. And especially with Pacify, Grenadier, all of that, we're hopefully starting to see an identity of some sort for life around overtimes. They can really punish overtime. I really like this idea because, you know, we have Triage, we have Mass Triage, and now we have another spell that does a lot more for you if there happens to be an overtime. This is a very 1v1 oriented spell. I guess my next question is, what is the direction that other schools are going to get? Because I feel like every school hopefully should get conditional spells at some point, right? We have Monster Mash, we have Sprite Swarm. I'm hoping that we get some sort of myth type spell where if your opponent has a minion, you can do more damage because Myth is a school of minions. I think it's hard for me to think of one for fire because right now it seems like life seems to be the overtime punishing school. But maybe for ice, the more shields your opponent has, maybe you could do something. Maybe with storm, the more blades your opponent has, you could do something. I could see them doing little, like, you know, small little tweaks here and there for all these schools, and maybe we can see, like, I don't know, like mini Scion spells for every school. There were other changes in test test from. If you actually go to the Spellements, you can actually see these. And I'm just gonna go over these very quickly, but they don't really seem to change much. Basically, the Spellement pats for Camp Bandit, for the Berry Surprise, for the Splash Squatch, all of those spells, they basically just do a little bit more damage now. So for example, this one, when you upgrade it completely, it keeps the whole convert one trap to life and convert one trap to half a universal trap. It keeps those utilities, but basically you can do a little bit more damage. Now, I'm glad that they are adding more damage because this is a super underwhelming spell, but even if you get all the way to the end, which it's very unrealistic that you will, even if you do that, you're looking at what, 600 damage? Like a Luminous is almost always going to be better than this. I still wish they had changed this to accommodate more than one trap. I would literally take a damage nerf if this affected 2 to 3 traps. Like if this was like, I don't know, 50 damage even, but it actually like converted multiple traps, I think this would be a much better spell. I don't think the thing that's in the spotlight when it comes to the spell is the damage. So it's still a very underwhelming spell, and honestly, because Spellements are so inaccessible anyways, this little extra damage boost, it does very little for me. What I will say is that the damage buffs to Splash Squatch are actually pretty damn, they're kind of huge. Like when you look at just the damage variation, right? I honestly don't recommend, I didn't realize when I made the video at first that this removes traps and not shields. The fact that this removes traps is kind of irrelevant because for 6 pips you can always dimension shift. And I feel like minions, like, I don't know, you can literally summon a 0 pip minion. If someone's really going to be trap stacking against you, you might as well dimension shift. So I feel like now, looking at it, the best version of this is the version that goes up in damage and that's it. And when you're looking at the tier 5, it's actually a lot. The high end of this almost does 600. That means that with the Solar Surge, this can do literally almost 800 damage for 4 pips just on its base, which I do think is actually a lot more than something like Keeper. In fact, when you compare it to TC Ninja Pigs, right, which is slightly better than the regular spell, you can actually see that the high end of this for 4 pips, it literally almost catches up to Ninja Pigs. And to be honest, the fact that you can use 2 of these in a row with full pip chance and you cannot do that with Ninja Pigs when you're at 6 pips, that actually makes this slightly better in terms of making like a spike damage type play. So this really begs the question of how do you get these Spellements? Because if it were up to me, I would 100% try to get to tier 5 Splash Squatch. Then again, if this is just like every other pack, I'm not going to do that because it's extremely pay to win. And I think this brings us to a very important point that I'm going to close off the video with. It's the fact that these Spellements, like let's look at Nautilus, right? You can literally use Spellements to get to a point where the spell is not just completely different, but it's on another league. Like when you look at tier 5 Nautilus that steals 2 blades, this is on another level compared to the first version. And it's also the same with Splash Squatch. Like, these are on another level, but the problem is when the only way you can get these Spellements is by just, you know, splurging on crowns. What this really does is it just becomes a way to pay for rank in PvP, or it just becomes pay to win in general. I think this is a really common critique that they've received, and they haven't done anything about the Celestia pack Spellements. I still don't know of any way to get those without buying packs. So if I wanted Nautilus Spellements, if I wanted Spiritual Tribunal Spellements, I don't know any way of getting them. And I think what the effect of that problem is, you find spells like this that really should be made better with Spellements that can't, because you know that if they made this better, they would get the critique where it's just pay to win. I don't know when they're gonna make the Spellements for these droppable. I guess it doesn't have to be right when the pack drops if that's their business strategy, but I think it's absolutely unacceptable that we've had a Celestia pack in the Crown Shop for I think over a year now, and there's still no droppable alternative. PvP and Spellements should be about customizability and strategy, and what Spellements do is it allows you that if you're willing to pay crowns, and I think that's really bad. I'm very excited to use this spell. I'm a little annoyed at the fact that this is so underwhelming and the other spells are so good with Spellements. It's like a really weird like hullabaloo. So we'll see. Hopefully, you know, they take those criticisms into consideration. I really do hope that, you know, these Spellement spells, as creative as they can get, we need accessibility. Otherwise, they're not really new spells in Wiz. Let me know what y'all's opinions are on the Spellements and the new life spell. As always, drop a like if you enjoyed, leave a sub if you're new. There's tons of links in the description, including my Twitch, my Twitter, my Discord, my Instagram, and of course my Patreon. And as always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. So stay awesome, and yeah.